Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Today we will be discussing the second entry into my Gods and Goddesses series. The goddess that we will be discussing today is an Egyptian goddess who may perhaps to some of you be very well known and perhaps to some of you may not be known at all. We are going to be discussing the solar deity Sekhmet, the goddess of the hunt, of lions, of the desert, of warriors, of protection, of healing, and of various other things that we will be discussing in this video. Sekhmet evidently comes from an Egyptian word Sekhem. If I pronounce that correctly, I obviously do not speak Egyptian or ancient Egyptian or whatever. It means power or might. So her name can roughly be translated as the one who is mighty or the one who is powerful, I suppose, which is a very apt title if you have ever worked with this deity, with this goddess. She is a very, in my experience, fierce, stalwart, protective deity who has a bit of an edge to her, I would say. From my interactions with her, I would describe her as someone who is caring, protective towards those that she likes and those that deserve to be protected, those that deserve to be healed, that deserve to be under her care. But she is someone who is also in possession of a touch of frenzy, as I would put it, because there is a certain element, much like you see in other deities like Odin, particularly in his aspect of Wodan or Wodanaz or Wotan or however you want to call him, in his aspect as a bringer of the rage, bringer of the frenzy. I have seen certain parallels between her, Sekhmet that is, and the Hindu goddess Kali, where she goes into ecstatic trances, battle furies, battle trances, and stuff like that. So she is a very Sekhmet. That is again, Sekhmet is a very dualistic goddess in that sense, but it is. If you look throughout history, throughout all the pantheons that we see the world over, that's actually not a very uncommon trait to have, where it is kind of this seeming or at first glance dichotomy, this counterbalance that you see, because in our modern society we obviously think that violence is always a bad thing and healing is always a positive thing. But one has to sometimes ask, when is violence warranted? When is it required to protect something that is good? Because at the end of the day, evil men, evil women, even evil people, they don't care about what is moral, what is ethical. Excuse me. They don't really care about what is sacred, what is good, what is healthy, and so such people will, whether you like it or not, they will take up certain things to harm others, to subjugate others. And in such a setting, can we say that it is good for good people to be pacifists, if you will? And my personal answer to that is no, because as the saying goes, all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And this is why I think that Sekhmet is a very interesting character, a very interesting deity, a very interesting goddess to work with, and someone who certainly resonates with me as a person, my stance, my view on things. Now, of course, someone would say violence begets violence, but again, my counter-argument to that would simply be to say evil people do not care about your morals. They do not care about your, about your ethics, your perception of what good people should be doing. We call them evil people for a reason. And if we as people who are not of that nature do not actively do anything about such people, they will just run loose and rampant, and they will subjugate others who are either defenseless or who are for some reason unwilling or unable to stand up for themselves. So this is where I feel that this warrior aspect, this battle frenzy aspect, is actually a very positive thing, and that is part of the reason why I work with deities such as this a lot, such as Odin, such as the Morrigan, such as Thor, such as Tyr, gods who are usually in charge of these very, in our modern perception, very dichotomous areas such as warfare, but on the other hand also healing, like Sekhmet is. And that is what I want to introduce to you today as well. That's why I want to introduce this goddess to you. For those of you who are not aware, if you are of a similar mindset as I am, if you are of someone who perhaps needs to have a deity in their life or wants to have a deity in their lives, and you happen to resonate with the Egyptian pantheon, for example, Sekhmet might be a great goddess to call on if you wish to have that protection in a spiritual sense that is going to come from working with her, and perhaps also to find your inner warrior, if you will. But it doesn't just stop there, of course, because Sekhmet, like I said, is also a goddess of healing and of compassion, among other things. Because she is a deity that is, in my interactions with her, also a very understanding, patient, and just a very pleasant individual to work with, who is not overly aggressive or demanding in the sense. I mean, she obviously expects you to keep your word where and when possible, but I will get more into why I say these things in a little bit. So, to continue, Sekhmet is also referred to as the daughter of Ra. That is, of course, the Egyptian god of the sun. And she is herself, like I mentioned, very much a solar deity, especially in her, association with deserts, with lions and lioness, because she is a lioness. She's often depicted as basically a human female with a lion's head, and she is often also portrayed with the solar disk, the sun disk that you see with other Egyptian gods like Isis. Like Ra himself, the sun god, of course. So she's also often associated with the colors yellow, which is again another solar aspect that we see. The desert color of the sand, of course. Red is also a color that she's often associated with. She's in fact often portrayed as wearing a red dress, which is associated with the color of blood, actually, and that is an interesting thing, because you could interpret blood both in a violent manner, as in a warrior goddess, in her warrior goddess aspect, I should say. But it can also be, of course, referring to blood in the sense of treatment, of healing and stuff like that. So, because that is obviously something that a physical, healer works with, whether it be a surgeon or a physician or something along the lines. And as someone who is currently training to be, a psychologist, I also find her an interesting character, interesting deity in that aspect, because that is also, of course, a form of healing that is not obviously physically, in that sense, as in repairing the physical body, but it is obviously working with, neurochemicals and, tinkering with the mind and making sure that everything functions properly, and altering harmful and toxic, thought patterns and habits, and all sorts of other discrepancies that may negatively impact one's life. So, like I said, in my personal interaction with her, I find her a very patient individual, a kind goddess that is, something, of course, that befits a goddess of healing, a goddess of protection, because, you need to obviously have positive feelings and, generous feelings towards the ones that you are helping. Compassion is what obviously needs to come to the forefront if you wish to heal. It is also obviously, and this is partially due to her aspect as a lion, as a warrior, very evident that one should not fuck with her, basically. You should not disrespect her, or in some way, shape, or form, dishonor her, or violate her in some way. And it is absolutely, expected that you live up to your end of the bargain. Now, I will say that I actually had a task that I was supposed to perform for her with a contract that I made to help me with a certain very irritating situation that I dealt with, and that I, basically was looking for a deity for to help remedy. And one day I was in the shower, and literally I was thinking to myself, you know what, who could I contact for this? And suddenly the name Sekhmet pops in my head. And I had actually never worked with this deity before, so this name just pops in my head, and I start researching this. And sure enough, she is a goddess who has attributes that fit what I needed to have the, that fit the problem in order to combat it, shall we say? So That's something that I found very interesting, and throughout my workings with Sekhmet, which is admittedly a very recent development. I have not really begun working with a lot of Egyptian deities all that much, because I'm mainly focused on the Germanic slash Norse pantheon. Like you are probably able to tell from my other videos, from my initiation into the Elder runes and stuff like that. If you are new to my channel and you just so happen to wonder where I come from, but yeah, so it was pretty interesting because throughout my workings with her, that appeared to be in a lot of synchronicity with certain other things. For example, as I was writing the script for this video and as I was meditating on what to write and what to say and what she would like to express to my viewers, to you guys, the things that she wants known about herself. I was just sitting in the bath and meditating, and then I went on to write my script. And I actually brought a couple of incense sticks with me because that's usually how I do it. I take a bath and then I meditate in the bath, and then I light a candle, and then I light a couple of incense sticks and stuff like that to help me get into a trance, or to help me get into meditation deep enough to garner information. And I brought one stick of incense that was a dragon's blood incense stick with me, and two copal incense sticks. And I had never bought a package of copal incense before, and I did now because I don't know, I just saw it and it just caught my eye, and I purchased it, and then I went home and did this whole thing that I just talked about. And I meditate, and I do some research online, because obviously not everything that I do comes from meditation and stuff like that. I do also research things like online and on the net and stuff. So sure enough, others point out that Sekhmet apparently likes offerings of dragon's blood incense and of copal. And I did not know that, so I had unknowingly apparently had that synchronicity happen there, where I apparently picked out intuitively certain kinds of incense that she liked. So that was actually pretty cool that I had that kind of stuff happen. And I mean, if you engage with magic, you find this kind of stuff all the time, but it doesn't actually really detract from the wow factor of it, because you keep having these confirmations that what you're doing is actually legit, that what you're doing is actually helping, that what you're doing is actually having an effect on the world around you in various ways. I mean, try making contracts with deities, and you will start seeing magnificent things happen if you give it some time to manifest, and if you can just stop obsessing about the things that you are making these contracts for. So the way that I can attest that she is a patient deity, and that she's actually a very compassionate deity, if you are on her good side, or if you are somehow unable to complete your assignments. And normally it doesn't really happen that I am unable to complete assignments on time, but I have had a very rough period with so much to do. I wouldn't even say necessarily a rough period. It's more like just a really excessively busy period, even though I'm currently having some free time. But I caught up on some magic stuff, and basically what happened is I made this contract with Sekhmet, and I promised her that I would do a particular task, like I said. And I accidentally, I had requested to the deities that I had tasks with to get an extension, so I fortunately did. Also, without knowing, through my spirits, requested extension with a particular with all these particular deities that I had tasks lined up with, basically. And as it turns out, the task that I needed to do for Sekhmet was actually going to be overdue on the date that I asked it. Needless to say, there was a deadline rapidly approaching, and I had no time to finish what I said that I would do within the time frame that I had originally set for myself. Now, again, this fortunately rarely happens, but I was unfortunately, in this case, rather swamped. So I did get extensions, and sure enough, as it turns out, she had given me an extension, and I was warned in time because I had this urge to, hey, check this contract that you made with her, and I did. And sure enough, 2 days after I 2 days after I had that urge, there was an assignment due, but the assignment that was originally planned was due 5 days before that, so I had gotten a 5-day extension. 3 of those had gone by without me noticing, and I had 2 days left to make make good on my promise, basically, because I apparently received that extension for 5 days. So I found that to be a pleasant surprise, because As I said, I haven't worked with Sekhmet for all that long, but she was very understanding of my situation, and I found this a pleasant surprise, a pleasant experience, and I did really see her, her compassion in that, because many gods are, of course, of the opinion that if you make a contract, if you make a bargain, then you need to follow through with it, and usually I am of the opinion, of that opinion as well, and yeah, I'm somewhat ashamed, kind of, sort of, to admit that I don't always live up to my promises, because in this case, I just genuinely couldn't. I mean, it didn't come from a place of like laziness, but just being swamped is basically how I would describe it. So, yeah, I mean, that is not for me to say that, oh, if you make bargains or contracts with Sekhmet, that you can just, gloss over it or something like that. It's just that it is something that I found very pleasant and very surprising to find out when working with someone who was relatively new when working with them. So, because I mean, normally you build a bit of a relationship, and in this case, I just needed to call on the assistance of someone, and I got well, I got approached by her, or a spirit of hers that basically invited me to work with her. So that is something that I found very nice and pleasant. And I mean, I also feel that this, displays patience on her part, and this is something that I found, very pleasant in in my interactions with her, and it does illustrate patience on her part as well, and compassion and understanding for uh, human fallacy, I suppose, if you will. I mean, because I felt that had I rushed it, if I had caught it on time on my original due date, I feel that really, because I was so swamped, that my work for her would have been very, subpar, and very, rushed, and just not pleasant, and really it wouldn't have been as convincing as it turned out to be. So basically. Yeah, no, I can understand this mindset, because I am someone who is also of the opinion that if it needs to be done, and it needs to be done properly, and this is something that I do see with myself, and that is also something that I like about her, because she does have this era of efficiency and effectiveness, and that is, of course, something that matches very thoroughly with her aspect of being a hunter or huntress. A lioness, because lions are, predatory animals, of course. It's something that I find very appealing, because I too like to exercise patience, if it is required for a situation to unfold better than what would have happened if you had just rushed it. So in my interactions with her, Sekhmet does teach the warrior and the healer, or in my case, those that walk both paths, because I am also very strongly of the opinion that a practitioner who does not know how to curse, does not know how to heal. I certainly am not someone who is a white light person in that sense. Um, so I find it so she teaches the value of patience, of compassion. That is to say, she teaches when compassion is warranted. She teaches also when to be merciless to an enemy, as befits a hunter or huntress. She teaches that there is a place for compassion, of course, a place for protecting those that cannot or are unable to protect themselves, a place for, just pouncing on your prey. Sometimes that is also necessary, and like I said earlier in the beginning of the video, there are people in this world who, for various reasons, because they are frankly evil people, they do not deserve to be treated with mercy or compassion. They just need to have justice served to them. I mean, far be it from me to say that, I am a flawless being, of course, but I know that I'm not a bad person. I know that most humans are not bad people. I think that most people are, people who are out for their own benefit to a certain extent, and that is, of course, natural. That is the survival instinct that we, as a species, have. That is part of the evolutionary process, of course. And I also think that most people have an understanding that in order to get ahead, they need to cooperate with other beings. And I also think that most people do have inherent, an inherent sense of empathy, and that people do understand the need for tribes, for working together in groups, for collaboration, for cooperation with each other. So I do think that humans have an inherent, societal and empathetic structure that you frankly see in other species, like wolves, like wolf packs and stuff like that as well. So I do very strongly feel that this is a very very positive aspect to her personality, and that there is a primal understanding almost of these traits of humanity and of other animals who function like that in prides or packs or stuff like that. So, I mean, this is also something that in my personal initiation into the other Fufa arc in the Rune of Manas, which was the last video that I uploaded on that particular topic, as I'm currently still being initiated into Lagus. Yeah, so, I mean, that did come to the forefront, and that is something that is integral to the human species, to the human race as a whole, because we would not have been able to become the quote-unquote dominant species on land, if you will, if that weren't the case, if we didn't have the cooperation, if we didn't have our ability to work together as teams, as groups, as tribes, as nations to get ahead. And in the sense of the healer, because we have already strongly discussed the hunter aspect, the warrior aspect of doing what needs to be done, of protection, of acting in certain manners that other people may not be willing due to perhaps misconceived morals or misplaced mercy or misplaced misplaced sympathy for people who frankly don't deserve it. I mean, for example, a serial killer, would you really show them mercy if they are just people who have no regard for other people's lives? But let us discuss now the aspect of healers and compassion and stuff like that. Because, I mean, let's face it, in order to truly heal, in order to truly understand the pain of those that you aim to help, in order to heal them, you need to, of course, be able to place yourself in their shoes. You need to be able to also logically and empathetically be able to observe what the patient is feeling, what the person that you're trying to help is feeling, in order to help them fully and most thoroughly heal themselves. And this is not just something that is, of course, from a physical perspective the case. This is also something that is the case with, like I said earlier, I'm a student of psychology, so this is, of course, the case with mental healing, mental health care. This is the case with spiritual healing in my shamanic capacity. This is, of course, something that I preside over as well, where it is necessary that people, recognize their own spiritual hurt, where you strip yourself or help others in this case strip themselves of, past life hurt, past life contracts, help them address phobias that may stem from past lives, that they may have certain attachments, certain entities or spirits that are attached to them that may be doing them more harm than good in this particular life. That's not to say that always the attachment in question is necessarily negative, but it may be perceived as negative by a particular incarnation because it no longer resonates with what that current incarnation wants. And this is why I have said in other videos, for example, that you need to be careful when writing these contracts, and that you submit end dates when you, for example, pass from this world in this particular incarnation and stuff like that. But that is a whole different, whole different ballgame to discuss that, and we don't want to, go too much into that because this video is obviously focused on Sekhmet. But so we do really ask healers, because I mean I do often call myself a warrior shaman, spiritual warrior, and this is certainly true, but this also means that you are willing and able to confront spiritual forces who are perhaps malign or malignant or malicious, however you want to put it, both to yourself, especially initially when you're going through your initiation and when you're going to, be facing your own demons, if you will, for lack of a better term. But you also need to be able and willing to face the hurt and pain of others. So in that sense, I also call myself a warrior. But at the same time, you are also facing and helping the other person process their pain. So in that sense, you are also at the same time, you're also a healer, and not just someone who takes on negative entities, or beings that are malicious to the person in question. And again, as I always have to outline, I know that there is in certain groups of magic, certain paths of magic, the tendency to refer to old pagan gods as demons, as a sort of way of rebelling, against like the established Abrahamic order that is currently still present in our lives. However, when I say demon, I'll let that be very clear. As always, there is a understanding between myself and most people that I work with directly in magic, that when I say demon, I mean a being that is malignant, malicious towards you or our species at large, that is in direct conflict with you as an individual, or that is in direct conflict with humanity as a whole, because they're, for example, just parasites that seek to leech off of you. I mean, I have encountered plenty of spirits, plenty of entities, if you will, who initially then pretend to be helpful, but then later on just attach themselves to you, and then they start, just like draining you and not making good on their end of the promise. But because you're inexperienced and you accepted the help of something that is not benevolent, because you weren't, experienced and able to discern such things, they start to profiteer off of you, and that is, of course, one of the very prime dangers of being a dabbler in the metaphysical, which is something that I feel there is really not enough information on, which is why I always stress this point when it comes up. But this is also something where I feel that Sekhmet is actually a very good deity to go to, because she is a protector, and because she is a healer, and because she is a warrior, and because she is, in my experience, a very caring and nurturing, but also at the same time can be a very merciless being once she gets into that state, because there do exist myths where she goes into a battle frenzy, where she needs to be placated with, the ancient Egyptians, for example, after they won battles or after they fought battles. It's not quite clear to me if it was just if they won it, or if they were just doing it after battles in general, period. But they were, of the habit of celebrating feasts to Sekhmet to get her out of her battle frenzy, to placate her, and to have her return to, her peaceful mindset, and this is, of course, something that you often see with in our tradition, in the Germanic tradition, the Vod, the ecstasy, the rage, Vodanaz, W-O-D, Vod, Vodanaz, bringer of the rage, bringer of the ecstasy, bringer of the the berserker gang, the battle frenzy, if you will. So that is something that you see, like I said at the beginning of the video, something that you see in a lot of deities like this. And so that is something that you do need to keep in mind. If you find that intimidating or somehow off-putting, maybe Sekhmet is not the best kind of person for you to work with. If you find that very objectionable, I personally don't, because of the path I walk. I really do feel that Sekhmet is there for someone who resonates with me. She is a very self-empowering individual who stands for justice, also the carrying out of justice, for inspiring people to do battle for the things that they believe in. If you want to give it a more wholesome modern day interpretation, I suppose, to empower yourself to fight for for the causes that you believe in. For example, you're an animal rights activist. That is something that you can also utilize the help of Sekhmet for, to empower yourself in your desired goals, in your desired causes, in your desired line of work, perhaps in your activism, in all these various aspects of life. She can also help you to become a more confident, self-reliant person. She can assist with healing, perhaps in that sense, low self-esteem. She can help you gain confidence and courage in that sense. She can, help you, because she is a being who, presides over healing. I get the sense that she's more someone who does, mental healing, spiritual healing. For physical, healing and stuff like that, I would look more to Thoth, who is actually someone I will be doing a video on next, because I also have I also have plans in the video idea laying around to do Thoth, or to make a video on Thoth in a couple days. So expect to see that for the more physical side of healing, the more physical side of things, the more scholarly type, to move things a bit away from the warrior aspect and to bring a bit more of a varied topic in here. These are all, things and aspects and traits that you can invoke or evoke Sekhmet for and empower yourself with. Because, I mean, let's face it, in order to grow, you need to go through healing of some sort usually, or you need to go through a period of transformation, and change is always very scary, and Sekhmet, being the warrior that she is and being the empathetic nurturer that she is, can help you, guide yourself, or can help you be guided through that. So, opening yourself up is scary to, for example, admit to yourself that you have an issue, to admit to yourself that you have to change in order for progress to be made. To have, if you are the person doing the healing, if you are the person helping others heal, to have patience, to face your traumas, to have the courage to face that, to face your inner hurts, to face your inner weaknesses, to overcome them, to grow through that, and to basically just come out a better person in general. Because it does require courage and what I would call a warrior spirit in order to, face that, to overcome that, and to empower yourself in such a manner. To rise out of the ashes as a stronger, healthier, more self-empowered individual. Because at the end of the day, that is, of course, what magic is partially about. And that is not to say that I think there's anything bad with wanting to get money or a spouse through magic, as long as you A, respect free will, and B, you do it in such a manner that is that is healthy and beneficent to everybody involved. And with all that said, with all these basic points outlined, I would like to discuss some offerings that, if you want to approach Sekhmet, which you could be giving her some ideas. In terms of offerings, she greatly appreciates offerings that are colored red or yellow, to a lesser extent, therefore also orange, because red and yellow mixed together is orange. She is often depicted as a yellow lioness in Egyptian hieroglyphs, of course, with a red dress, like I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this video. Gemstones of that kind of color, like tiger's eye, that is usually yellow, orangey kind of, bloodstone, carnelian, that sort of thing. So basically, just gemstones that are either red, yellow, or orange. She will appreciate offerings of raw red meat, especially. Think venison, beef, stuff like that, along those lines. She likes spicy food. Red wine is something that she appreciates, from what I have researched. Offerings of, believe it or not, sand. I live in a desert, so sand is pretty much all around. Fire is actually something that she appreciates, so that you could interpret that as being a candle. Now, if you choose to go with candles, again, I would recommend that you light a candle that is, of the colors that I mentioned. The fire in and of itself is also an offering. So, of course, do what you will and what feels right in that regard with you. But if you want to stick with this particular theme, that's what I would recommend. Being a goddess of war, she also, appreciates offerings of weaponry, swords, spears, knives, what have you. Axes, khopesh, a khopesh sword, stuff like that. She also appreciates offerings of flowers. It is my understanding that I've never actually personally offered her flowers, but I have read from various sources that she appreciates very brightly colored flowers. As well as tea, milk, especially strong tea and warm milk specifically. And I would personally offer these kinds of things if you are doing healing, because milk and tea, especially tea, of course, are known historically to have healing, mending properties, and you often see this in herbal medicine. Teas are used a lot to help treat certain illnesses and stuff like that. So if you were someone who works a lot with earthen magic, if you work a lot with herbal magic and stuff like that, which is, in my personal opinion, a part of earth magic, of course, but you know, I would especially do that if you are invoking or evoking her for healing work, like I said. So in terms of incense, as I mentioned in the beginning, dragon's blood, copal are good incense. Frankincense is also another one that you could use, and these do not necessarily have to be like resins. They could very well, like I did, uh, you know. Uh, Incense sticks with that scent to it, as long as it stems from the heart. That is, of course, what matters. As long as it is given freely, to have some thoughtfulness behind it. That is always the case with every deity, of course, not just with Sekhmet. Um, so these are all offerings that you could safely give Sekhmet, and you will receive a warm reception from that. Is my experience and my understanding. So yeah, this is pretty much all I have to say on this topic on Sekhmet, the goddess of war, the goddess of protection, the goddess of the hunt, goddess of compassion and healing as well. So yeah, next video I will be uploading is most likely going to be on Thoth, just a god of magic, of math, of sciences. And so thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Hell.